Happy July, YouTube. Hottest month of the year, my favorite month of the year, arguably. Well, no, not arguably, it is. Um, I feel like I haven't been on here for a while because, as I said in my last blog, I'm always outside and doing stuff this time of year, and I forget to update things, but it is time. I finally remembered. And that's also a side effect of being in your 40s. You forget things, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But anyways, first thing I got up to. Avengers, Everybody Wants to Rule the World book. Um, an interesting story. To start it off, the Avengers are all kind of divided. Iron Man's responding to a threat in DC that Ultron is rising again. Thor and Scarlet Witch are off in Siberia, where Dormammu has like shifted dimensions and is planning something there. Hawkeye and Black Widow are in the Savage Land, where AIM has set up a base for some nano technology for mind control. Bruce Banner is in Madripoor, where the High Evolutionary is up to something. And then, who else am I missing here? Oh yeah, Captain America is in Berlin, where Baron von Strucker and Hydra are up to something. So the problem is global communications go down while all of these different situations all arise at the same time. And as each set of Avengers solves their particular situation, all of their enemies all point to the same thing. They're all trying to save the world, apparently, because there's a looming threat out there that's even bigger than what they would be up to. So in the end, the Avengers have to kind of think it out and go, okay, well, what's going on here? What is this secret enemy that has got all these other enemies trying to save the world? So then they have to go figure it out and confront that enemy. So pretty good book. Standard Avengers comic book kind of fare. Lots of action, lots of classic enemies, and yeah, definitely worth the read. Next thing. The Predator movie that was in films last summer. This Hunters and Hunted is a prequel to that kind of sets it up. So it focuses on a project or a secret government agency or whatever it is. It's called Project Stargazer. So their aim is to capture one of these predator aliens and study it. The problem is because there's been reports for years, hundreds of years going back, of these aliens coming to Earth and hunting humans, but nothing's ever been taken from them. There's no hard evidence. All they know is that they like to come when it's super hot and whatever. So there's one guy that's in charge of this project named Roger Elliott. Back in the Vietnam War, he was one of the rare people to survive an encounter against one of these creatures, and he's the one kind of in charge of Project Stargazer, and he's training a task force of 8 hardened military guys to eventually take the Predator in when one should show up again. And this base operates out of Florida. It's a really hot summer, and soon enough they have a Predator on their hands. The task force loses 4 guys in the process of capturing the Predator. And to make matters worse, when he gets into captivity, he soon after escapes, and meaning that they lost those 4 guys for basically nothing. So then they have to go out again, and it's no holds barred. They're like, no, this time we're killing it. So yeah, and it's some backstory into how the whole lab was set up for that movie. Will Trigger, one of the main he was kind of a villain, a human villain in that movie, that he's involved in that, so it sets his character up and stuff like that. And overall, pretty entertaining read. Standard Predator fare, just like standard Avengers fare, which that's great. Don't stray too far from what made it successful. That's what I always say. Next thing up, I don't have a case for it because we watched it on Netflix, but we watched the Benchwarmers DVD, which stars a few SNL alums. David Spade, Rob Schneider, John Lovitz is in there, and then some other guys, John Heder. So the premise is Rob Schneider is a guy named Gus who is working as a landscaper in small town USA, and he one afternoon he sees a team of little league baseball players picking on a nerd at a baseball diamond, and he goes to intervene, and then this little league team gives him the business, and he says, okay, we'll challenge you for control of who gets to play on this field. I'll take on your little league team. And the little league team scoffs at him. So he enlists the help of two of his buddies, Richie and Clark, which are John Heder and David Spade. They're brothers and they're total nerds. They're totally useless at sports, and as to be his Gus's two teammates. And but Gus is so good at baseball that he just strikes out all the little league guys and crushes home runs when he's up to bat. So he beats them, and it's all fun and games. And then at a pizza place afterwards, one of the dads, the coach of the little league team, speaks up to Gus and his friends and says, "Don't try that again." And this guy is like a complete bully from when they were younger, so they hate this guy. Then the kid who Gus helped not get bullied, his dad is actually a millionaire, whatever, played by John Lovitz, and he loves what he did, what Gus did for his son, and he has an idea. He wants to build an official, awesome baseball park in their hometown, and he wants to organize a tournament with Gus's team against all the little league teams in the area for control of that diamond, who gets to play there. And he wants this team of misfits, of 3 grown men misfits, to win and show kids and nerds and people who aren't good at sports all around the country that they can play too. And so then it just kind of unfolds from there, and Gus's mysterious past comes up to throw a monkey wrench into things, but it's just classic slapstick SNL type of comedy, right? And it's a very entertaining watch. Next thing up, Jimmer and I recently finished watching this double shot of Johnny English. I've always been a huge fan of Rowan Atkinson and his Mr. Bean character, and then, he's been in a couple other movies too, like Scooby-Doo and Rat Race, which I really enjoyed. And I've always wanted to watch Johnny English, and so when I found this in the bargain bin, I was like, done. The initial Johnny English movie, he works for MI7, the secret British intelligence service, as one of their agents, but he's kind of a buffoon, so he's basically a desk jockey, right? He's just works in the office and doesn't get to see any action. He's briefing their top agent before a mission and says, "I've checked out the codes for the submarine myself." And later on, their top agent dies when he couldn't access the submarine. So at this agent's funeral, Johnny English drops the ball again on security, and their enemies attack and blow up all the other MI7 agents in one fell swoop, meaning Johnny English is the only agent left. So MI7 has no choice but to deploy him. The threat is that a French billionaire named Pascal Sauvage has recently restored the crown jewels, and he's about to lead a function to reveal them to the public. And MI7's concerned that somebody's going to try and take a chance to steal this invaluable treasure. And so they post Johnny and his partner, I forget his name, it starts with a B. They post them on the case, and of course he's confident, but then they get stolen. So then it all unfolds from there. Johnny's certain that Pascal Sauvage is the head behind this thing, and whereas Pegasus, the leader at MI7, is incredulous that he would even think that and tells him to drop it. So Johnny has to go about his investigation kind of under the radar because he's not giving up on this Pascal Sauvage thing. And it turns out, in the end, he may be correct. But will he solve the case with how buffoonery, that type of buffoonish behavior, clueless behavior that he exhibits? So, very funny movie. The second one in the collection is the sequel to that, called Johnny English Reborn. It takes place about 7 years after the first movie, and as the film starts, we learn that 5 years ago he blew an operation in Mozambique, where the newly elected president there got assassinated on his watch, and because of that, he goes to Tibet and enlists with some monks, and has kind of been living that way for the 5 years since. But the new Pegasus at MI7, who's played by Gillian Anderson, who is super hot, has no choice but to bring him into the fold again. And the new threat is that the Chinese premier is supposed to be meeting in talks with the British Prime Minister coming up, and they fear that there's going to be an assassination attempt on him. So Johnny English and his new partner Colin, they get in into it, and they uncover this group called Vortex, who are behind the scheme. And it's a three-headed monster, and he has to track down its members and figure out what's going on. And in the end, they find out that one of the members is actually within MI7, which is a cause of some concern. So, and then everything unravels from there. And of course, it's the same slapstick, buffoonish type of comedy that we all know and love Rowan Atkinson for. Two great movies. Next up, I watched this recently, the sequel to The Kingsman, called The Kingsman: The Golden Circle. As this film opens up, it's been about a year since the first movie. Eggsy is just leaving the Kingsman tailor shop when he's approached by what's his name? I forget his name now. But he was a Kingsman applicant who got rejected in the first movie, and it ended up going bad. And he was presumed dead at the end of the first movie when they had the massive battle. And but he actually survived and now has a prosthetic robotic arm. And he goes after Eggsy, and they have this big battle that rages over through the streets of London. And in the end, Eggsy wins, but and then goes off to dinner with his girlfriend, the Crown Prince of Sweden, or Crown Princess of Sweden. And but during the battle, the prosthetic arm dropped in Eggsy's car, and it is controlled remotely and accesses the Kingsmen's database from within their own base. And not long afterwards, missile strikes are launched and takes out all of the Kingsmen's, the headquarters, the residential buildings where all their agents live. So Roxy's dead, everybody's dead except Eggsy survives and Merlin survives. Those are the only two. So then they're kind of grieving, and Merlin enacts this doomsday scenario. And with it, they discover that there's a secret agency just like theirs over in America called the Statesmen. So they go over there, and it's a bit of a rough introduction at first. They get off on the wrong foot, but soon enough they figure out they're all on the same side. They want to stop whoever it was doing all this to them. And Eggsy and Merlin are ecstatic to find out that the Statesmen actually have Galahad in their possession, although he's got amnesia. He survived from the first movie, but he doesn't know who he is anymore. So they've got to figure out who is doing this to them and stop them, and also try and get Galahad's memory back and get him back into the fold. And the villain in this one is actually Julianne Moore. She's a drug cartel leader operating out of some remote jungle location. And she's basically holding the world at ransom. She has laced her drugs with this virus that causes people to get a blue rash, then eventually develop paralysis, and then after that, death. And she has some demands she wants met, and if they are, she will release the antidote. And if not, then millions of drug users around the world will die. And then it all unravels from there, and it's just the action sequences in these movies and the way they're filmed are just insane. And the various ideas behind everything, like the villain Poppy, she has robotic dogs and she feeds people into the meat grinder. Like, it's just so crazy and so well shot and so zany that it's just these movies are fantastic. And I actually just read yesterday on the internet that there's going to be a third one in development over the next couple of years. So I can't wait for that. And it sounds like it might be a prequel. But either way, give me more Kingsman. Last thing, Blade Runner 2049. I was a big fan of the original Blade Runner movie, even though it's really weird. Like, it's so moody and slow moving, but also so intense and exciting at the same time. It's a really weird type of movie. But this one takes place 30 years after the first. The Tyrell Corporation that developed the replicants in the first movie have gone out of business because a lot of those replicants went rogue. And that's what the original Blade Runners were for, to hunt these replicants down and kill them. Since then, a guy named with the last name of Wallace, I forget his first name, has bought Tyrell Corp and revitalized it as the Wallace Corporation or something. He's developed new replicants that obey no matter what. They're way better than the originals. And certain numbers of these new replicants are tasked with being Blade Runners instead of humans who had issues doing it. One of these agents named Kay, who is played by Ryan Gosling, is out on a job and goes to a farm and kills an old replicant. But in the process of doing so and investigating the guy's property afterwards, discovers a mysterious chest buried in the ground. And once it's exhumed, they find a set of female bones in it. And looking at why she died, it turns out she died during childbirth. But upon further investigation, they find a serial number on her bones, meaning she was a replicant. This throws a big monkey wrench into everybody's thinking, because how can a replicant get pregnant and give birth? So that is something that needs to be kept under the rug, because if the replicants knew that they were capable of creating life and they are their own people, it could cause an uprising or a revolution or something. And they just want to keep peace as much as possible when replicants are thought of as second-class citizens anyways. Like, there's already a lot of tension, and that would just blow the lid off of everything. So Kay goes into investigating who this replicant was, finds out that it was a woman named, was it Rachel? I forget the first name. I think it was Rachel. And upon further investigation, learns that it was an original Blade Runner named Rick Deckard who impregnated her, and of course, as we all know from the first movie, that is Harrison Ford's character. So then Kay goes in search of Deckard, who went missing years ago and hasn't been seen since. He eventually finds him, confronts him, and then everything kind of goes from there. And there's lots of questions as to who is this child that was born, where is he or she, is Kay this child? Does Deckard know anything about all of this? And what is Wallace's infatuation with everything? And what's his play? Because he's up to something with this whole creation of life through replicants thing. So so it was a visual masterpiece, and very much like the first movie in that there was a lot happening, but a lot of times it was really slow, which in this case isn't bad. Normally that's bad when a movie's super slow. You're like, ugh. But for Blade Runner, it's just part of how everything works, and it works. So yeah, I thought it was a great movie. It's about 3 hours long, so it is a long watch, but definitely worth it. And I've heard some bad things about. I've heard that it was critically acclaimed and received very well, but that it lost a ton of money. So I don't know how that happens, but anyways, I definitely think it's more than worth the watch, especially if you like Blade Runner to begin with, the original. Then this movie is a no-brainer for you. So I highly enjoyed it. I recommend it. I recommend all the things I just mentioned, but yeah, that's just me. That's why I watched them in the first place, because I knew I'd like them. Anyways, that is all for now. I'm rambling, but yeah, definitely I'll be back at some point, if not in the later stages of July and then early August, because we always have lots on the go, and I just got to remember to get on here and post it. So until next time, have a great rest of the summer.